This is Caytlyn Naffziger. You can see her here with her daughter, Ellen. In this photo, you can see her as she was in life, holding one of her children close. She's dead now. She's dead because the defendant, Dustin Duren, the father of her children, murdered her. As Caytlyn sat on the couch, holding her 4-year-old daughter Ellen on her lap, very much like you see there, the defendant ripped Ellen from Caytlyn's arms. He stepped back, pointed his 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol at Caytlyn's head, and pulled the trigger. The defendant was still holding Ellen in his arms when he murdered her mother. The sound of the gunshot hurt Ellen's ears. After the defendant killed Caytlyn, he took Ellen and her 1-year-old sister, Valen. He packed their things, put them in his car, and began driving. He got all the way to Concord, where he called his parents, and he confessed. He told them that he had killed Caytlyn. He said he was going dark, and he shut off his phone, making it impossible for the authorities to track his location. The defendant's father called the Berlin police. The police went to the defendant's apartment and found Caytlyn there, dead. A few hours later, in the early morning hours of March 1st, 2024, an Amber Alert went out, including descriptions of the defendant, the girls, and the defendant's car. It was that Amber Alert that led to the defendant's arrest, after a citizen told the Keene police that she saw the defendant's car heading in the direction of an Applebee's in Keene. The police found the defendant in his car in the parking lot of Applebee's. Ellen and Valen were in the back seat. The murder weapon, that 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol, was in the driver's side door. After his arrest, the defendant gave an interview with the New Hampshire State Police. He told them his version of the story, his version of what happened between him and Caytlyn. He told the police that he wanted Caytlyn to leave his apartment, and when she wouldn't, he got angry. He tried to take Ellen from Caytlyn, but she refused, and he got angry. So he went to his desk, grabbed his gun, and used it to kill the mother of his children. You can see the words "very deliberate" up there on the screen. Those are his words, the defendant's words. Those are the words that he used to describe his killing of Caytlyn Naffziger when he spoke to the police. Ladies and gentlemen of this jury, this will not be a case that is difficult to understand. This will not be a whodunit. There will be no mystery. The evidence will prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Dustin Duren murdered Caytlyn Naffziger. The evidence will also show you why he did it. This is a case about anger and control. According to the defendant, he and Caytlyn had argued over the course of the day. He wanted her to leave and go back to Minnesota, where she was from. And when Caytlyn refused to do what he wanted, when he couldn't control her actions, he got angry. So he took his gun, pointed it at Caytlyn, and pulled the trigger. It was, as he said, a very deliberate act. During this trial, the state will provide you with evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Dustin Duren is guilty of the murder of Caytlyn Naffziger, as well as the crimes of reckless conduct with a deadly weapon and endangerment of a child. You will be given that evidence in the form of witness testimony, photographs, videos, and physical evidence. right now we're going to talk about some of that evidence. Caytlyn Naffziger and Dustin Duren were both from Minnesota. Together, they had 2 daughters, Elwyn and Valen. In February of 2024, Elwyn was 4 years old and Valen was 1. Caytlyn and the defendant did not have a good relationship. It was rocky. By January of 2024, things were not in a good place. That month, the defendant moved from Minnesota to New Hampshire. He brought Elwyn with him. Caytlyn and Valen remained in Minnesota. The defendant drove from Minnesota with Elwyn, and on January 23rd, he moved into an apartment in Berlin. That apartment was at 1063 Main Street. You can see 1063 Main Street here. It's a multi-family home in Berlin. The defendant's apartment was on the ground floor. After the defendant and Elwyn arrived in New Hampshire, the defendant and Caytlyn argued over the phone and through text messages. They argued about the children and their future. On February 27th, Caytlyn and Valen flew to Boston. They took a bus from the airport to New Hampshire, where they met family, and they spent the night with that family on the seacoast. The next day was the 28th. That day, Caytlyn and Valen got a ride and were dropped off at a restaurant in Ossipee. There, they met the defendant and Elwyn. After having lunch, the defendant drove them all in his car back to Berlin. They spent the night at 1063 Main Street, that apartment you saw. The defendant believed that after this visit, Caytlyn was going to return home to Minnesota without either of the girls. That was what he wanted. The next day, February 29th, according to the defendant, he asked Caytlyn repeatedly when her aunt was going to come pick her up. He asked her every 15 minutes because he wanted her to leave. He didn't want her there. Caytlyn ignored him. After repeated questions from the defendant about when she was going to leave, Caytlyn told him, "I'm not leaving, I'm staying." During the course of that day, according to the defendant, Caytlyn threatened to call the police and have the children taken away from her. This continued throughout the day. That evening, after a day of asking Caytlyn when she would leave, and a day of Caytlyn not doing what he wanted her to do, the defendant got angry. He was so angry that he started packing up Caytlyn's things so that he could drive her to the seacoast, do it himself. His plan was to load Caytlyn, her things, and both girls into the car, drive Caytlyn to her family and drop her off, and then return back to Berlin with both the girls. The defendant put the younger daughter, Valen, in her car seat. Caytlyn remained sitting on the couch, holding Elwyn in her arms. Similar to that photo. Caytlyn did not want to leave. The defendant tried to grab Elwyn from Caytlyn, but Caytlyn would not let go. She continued to hold Elwyn. She didn't want to leave. This made the defendant even angrier. Angry that Caytlyn refused to leave his apartment, and angry that she refused to let go of her daughter Elwyn, the defendant had had enough. In his mind, the line had been crossed. Those are his words. Those are the words he told the police, and he described to them why he killed Caytlyn and what was going through his head. By refusing to allow him to take her child from her arms, Caytlyn had crossed the line. This is a diagram of the defendant's apartment at 1063 Main Street. If you look at the living room, you can see that there is a couch, a coffee table in front of it, and then a desk on the other side of the room. Those black bars that you see represent doorways in the apartment. And you can see the back door is down a hallway on the left side. Caytlyn was sitting on the couch in front of the coffee table with Ellen on her lap. According to the defendant, after he tried and failed to take Ellen from Caytlyn as she sat on the couch, he crossed the room and went to his desk. From his desk, he grabbed this, his Beretta 9mm semi-automatic pistol. That gun had a loaded magazine in it, but no bullet in the chamber. According to the defendant, after he grabbed the gun, he racked it on the slide back, putting a bullet in the chamber. The gun was now ready to fire. The defendant walked back across the room from his desk, around the coffee table, and stood in front of Caytlyn, to her left. He grabbed Ellen and ripped her from her mother's arms with his left arm. He was holding that pistol in his right. After grabbing Ellen, holding her in his left arm, he stepped back and pointed his gun at Caytlyn's head. At this point, Caytlyn was sitting on the couch alone. She was unarmed. The defendant stood between Caytlyn and the exit. Ellen went in one arm, gun in the other. At that time, Caytlyn did not have a car. She did not have a bus ticket, and her family was hours away. As Caytlyn sat on that couch, holding Ellen in his arm, stepping back, the defendant pulled the trigger. He did not miss. He fired one bullet. That bullet entered Caytlyn's skull from the left side of her head, traveled through her brain, and exited the right side. The gunshot was loud. According to the defendant, Ellen immediately started grabbing her ear and complaining of the noise. The defendant went to the garage and put her in the car. This is what the defendant told the detectives later about what he was thinking at that moment after shooting Caytlyn in the head. He told them that he knew, in his words, that he was screwed. He understood what had happened, and he understood the consequences. He went back in the house. He got Valen, who was still in her car seat. He grabbed clothes for himself and for the girls. He grabbed food and water. He grabbed pillows and blankets. He put all of these things into his car. He grabbed his desktop computer. You can see it there in the defendant's car. After packing up those supplies with both girls in the car, the defendant started to drive. The defendant left his apartment in Berlin sometime between 5:38 p.m. and 6 p.m. on February 29th. He drove to Concord, arriving a little bit before 9 p.m. In Concord, the defendant sent a video of the girls to his mother, and then he called his parents. At 10:08 p.m. in Concord, he called them and told them what he had done. He said, "I killed Caytlyn." He said, "You should probably call the police." He also said, "I'm going to go dark, and I'm turning off my phone." He said he would turn himself in, but he wanted some time with the girls before he did it. At about 10:22 p.m., the defendant did turn off his phone. According to him, he drove west into New York State. At some point, he He stopped, and he and the girls slept in the car in the back seat. According to the defendant, when he woke up the next morning, he decided to turn himself in. So he started driving back to New Hampshire. As the defendant drove through Keene the morning of March 1st, he decided to have breakfast somewhere with his girls. While driving, he was seen and he was placed under arrest. The murder weapon, that 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol, was in the door, still loaded. That was March 1st. The evidence in this case will prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty of knowing second-degree murder and the alternative charge of reckless second-degree murder for killing Caytlyn Naffziger. It will also prove that he committed the crimes of reckless conduct with a deadly weapon and endangered another child. The evidence will prove to you that the defendant was not provoked when he pulled that trigger, and that the killing of Caytlyn Naffziger was not justified. When asked by a detective if Caytlyn had threatened to harm anyone, he said no. When asked by a detective if he knew he was endangering Ellen by firing a gun so close to her, he said yes. The evidence will prove to you that the defendant caused Caytlyn's death merely because he was angry and nothing more. You will hear testimony during this trial from state troopers and police officers who will describe how they investigated this case and how they gathered important pieces of evidence. You will hear from the medical examiner who conducted an autopsy of Caytlyn's body. An intelligence analyst with the New Hampshire State Police will describe for you how she used cell phone location data to map the defendant's movements before he turned his phone off. You will hear testimony from an expert firearms examiner who will tell you that the gun that fired the bullet that killed Caytlyn was the defendant's. And you will hear what the defendant told the police when they interviewed him and when he confessed. His version of the story. After his arrest, the defendant spoke with the state police at length. That interview was audio and video recorded. You will be able to see it for yourselves. You will be able to see the defendant's body language, his demeanor, and his tone of voice. You will see that the defendant was calm and in control when he described killing Caytlyn Naffziger. I've already shown you a few of the things that he said during that interview. You will see those and more presented during this trial. Those statements are just some of the evidence that will prove the defendant is guilty. Caytlyn is dead. She is dead because the defendant became angry when she refused to leave his apartment. And she is dead because she would not stop holding her 4-year-old daughter. And that made the defendant mad. So he grabbed his gun, took Caytlyn's daughter away from her, and shot her in the head. After you've heard all the evidence in this case, it will be up to you, the jury, to deliberate and deliver a verdict. When that time comes, when you have had all of the evidence placed in front of you, you will know, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty. You will know that the defendant murdered Caytlyn Naffziger. Just like the defendant knew from the moment that he fired his gun, you will know